It is characteristic of people with a very surface level of knowledge to give the impression that they know everything. We're continuing the reading of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. We're on Chapter 8, Decision. We left off yesterday with Napoleon Hill telling us that we have a brain and a mind of our own. Use it and use it to reach our own decisions. If you need facts or information from other people to enable you to reach decisions, as we always will, acquire these facts and information we need quietly without disclosing our purpose. Find information and answers from people who have the results you want. Never take advice from people who aren't living the way that you would like to live, who don't have the results that you want. Opinions are a dime a dozen, as Napoleon Hill was saying yesterday. Opinions are an easy commodity, and they're the cheapest commodity on earth. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to just tell somebody whose mind is just wide open. That's why we must protect our minds, make our own decisions, or when we need help and answers that we don't know to make a decision, do it quietly. Ask people who you know have results that you want. It is characteristic of people who have but a smattering or a veneer of knowledge to try to give the impression that they have much knowledge. Such people generally do too much talking and too little listening. Keep your eyes and ears wide open and your mouth closed if you wish to acquire the habit of prompt decision. Those who talk too much do little else. There's Robert Greene. He's a great author. I love him. And he talks about, I think it's in the 48 Laws of Power, Principles of Power. People that talk too much, give off an air. We just have this feeling that they are insecure or unsure about themselves. It's something very unconscious, but people who always have to be talking or throwing their opinion, or who just can't keep their mouth shut and listening in any conversation, we know intuitively that that person wants to prove something, or feels that they have to, or feels inadequate. If they don't share, people will think what of them? It reeks insecurity. It reeks insecurity. People who talk too much, people who cannot keep their mouth shut, people who have to share their opinion, reek of insecurity, unsureness of self. So let's keep our mouth closed and our ears and eyes wide open if we wish to acquire the habit of prompt decision. Those who talk too much do little else. If you talk more than you listen, you not only deprive yourself of many opportunities to accumulate useful knowledge, but you also disclose your plans and purpose to people who will take great delight in defeating you because they envy you. There's another great quote. Familiarity breeds contempt. Familiarity breeds contempt. When people know too much about you, when you just share, you put all the cards on the table, you just overshare, there's no boundaries. When people know know a lot about you, that if their mind isn't right, or their intentions aren't right, or you do one thing that makes them upset, they will use that against you. Even just in their minds. Well, she didn't follow through the other day and she lied to everybody. It's like familiarity breeds contempt. Roll that around in your mind. If you talk more than you listen, you not only deprive yourself of many opportunities to accumulate useful knowledge, but you also disclose your plans. People take great delight in defeating you when they know too much about you. Remember also that every time you open your mouth in the presence of a person who has an abundance of knowledge, you display to that person your exact stock of knowledge or your lack of it. Genuine wisdom is usually conspicuous through modesty and silence. Genuine wisdom is usually conspicuous through modesty and silence. Keep in mind the fact that every person with whom you associate is, like yourself, seeking the opportunity to accumulate money or reach a goal. If you talk about your plans too freely, you may be surprised when you learn that some other person has beaten you to your goal by putting into action ahead of you the plans which you talked so freely and unwisely about. And that goes into don't share your goals with anybody because they're going to steal your ideas. Honestly, I don't really subscribe to that. I don't live in a state of fear or scarcity that someone's going to steal my ideas because I have a lot of them. And fine, if they want to be petty or sneaky or, gross and take my idea, good luck, buddy, because it didn't come from you. So you're not going to be able to follow through with it and really bring to life what it was meant to, because you don't understand it because it didn't come from you. You were not the source of it. So you will not be able to maintain it or grow it. Never be afraid of someone stealing your idea. It's like, oh, please. Okay. Have faith in yourself that you could, even if they did, you can come up with another one. Keep in mind, okay, everyone's trying to look for, okay. Let one of your first decisions be to keep a closed mouth and open eyes and ears. As a reminder to yourself to follow this advice, it will be helpful if you copy the following epigram in large letters and place it where you will see it daily. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first, show it. I love that. Tell the world what you're going to do, but first, show it. This is the equivalent of saying that deeds, not words, are what count most. Everybody is talk, 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 talk. It is rare that people truly take action, take action, take action. Walk the walk. Everybody can talk a big game. Everybody can talk about what they're gonna do, what their intentions, what they were gonna do, what they could have done. Watch people's actions. What are people doing? What are their current results? It is a direct indication of what they've been doing, the actions they've been taking. All right. And this goes into freedom or death on a decision. I really love this whole next piece. It talks about the United States, the early days of the United States, and the Declaration of Independence. Freedom or death on a decision. The value of decisions depends upon the courage required to render them. The great decisions which served as the foundation of civilization were reached by assuming great risk, which often meant the possibility of death. Lincoln's decision to issue his famous Proclamation of Emancipation, which gave freedom to the colored people of America, was rendered with full understanding that his act would turn thousands of friends and political supporters against him. He knew, too, that the carrying out of the proclamation would mean death to thousands of men on the battlefield. In the end, it cost Lincoln his life. That required courage. Socrates' decision to drink the cup of poison rather than compromise in his personal belief was a decision of courage. It turned time ahead 1,000 years and gave to people, the unborn, then unborn, the right to freedom of thought and of speech. The decision of General Robert E. Lee, when he came to the parting of the way with the Union and took upon the cause of the South, was a decision of courage, for he well knew that it might cost him his own life, that it would surely cost the lives of others. But the greatest decision of all time, as far as any American citizen is concerned, was reached in Philadelphia, July 4th, 1776, when 56 men signed their names to a document which they well knew would bring freedom to all Americans, or leave every one of the 56 hanging from the gallows. You have heard of this famous document, but you may not have drawn from it the great lesson in personal achievement it so plainly taught. We all remember the date on this momentous decision, but few of us realize what courage that decision required. We remember our history as it was taught. We remember the dates and the names of the men who fought. We remember Valley Forge and Yorktown. We remember George Washington and Lord Cornwallis. But we know little of the real forces back of these names, dates, and places. We know still less of the intangible power which ensured us freedom long before Washington's armies reached Yorktown. We read the history of the Revolution and falsely imagine that George Washington was the father of our country, that it was he who won our freedom, while the truth is, Washington was only an accessory after the fact because victory for his armies had been ensured long before Lord Cornwallis surrendered. This is not intended to rob Washington of any of the glory he so richly merited. Its purpose rather is to give greater attention to the astounding power that was the real cause of his victory. It is nothing short of tragedy that the writers of history have missed entirely even the slightest reference to the irresistible power which gave birth and freedom to the nation destined to set up new standards of independence for all the peoples of the earth. I say it is a tragedy because it is the selfsame power which must be used by every individual who surmounts the difficulties of life and forces life to pay the price asked. Let us briefly review the events which gave birth to this power. The story begins with an incident in Boston, March 5th, 1770. British soldiers were patrolling the streets, by their presence openly threatening the citizens. The colonists resented armed men marching in their midst. They began to express their resentment openly, hurling stones as well as epithets at the marching soldiers, until the commanding officer gave orders, "Fix bayonets, charge." The battle was on. It resulted in the death and injury of many. The incident aroused such resentment that the Provincial Assembly, made up of prominent colonists, called a meeting for the purpose of taking definite action. Two of the members of that assembly were John Hancock and Samuel Adams. Long live their names. They spoke up courageously and declared that a move must be made to eject all British soldiers from Boston. Remember this, a decision in the minds of two men might properly be called the beginning of the freedom which we of the United States now enjoy. Remember, too, that the decision of these two men called for faith. It called for faith and courage because it was dangerous. Huge things that happen when we look back, even in your life, you're like, wow, that seemed just such like a normal day. We often overlook the decisions that create the biggest changes of our lives. Or as Napoleon Hill is saying here, this simple decision made by two men, John Hancock and Samuel Adams, might properly be called the beginning of freedom, which we of the United States now enjoy. Before the assembly adjourned, Samuel Adams was appointed to call on the governor of the province, Hutchinson, and demand the withdrawal of the British troops. The request was granted, the troops were removed from Boston, but the incident was not closed. It had caused a situation destined to change the entire trend of civilization. Strange is it not, how the great changes such as the American Revolution and the World War have often had their beginnings in circumstances which seemed unimportant. That's literally what I just said. The biggest things that have happened, God, I don't remember. I remember hearing in a history book one time or something about, I think the First World War, there was this theory of how it all started. It was like Ferdinand and somebody didn't greet somebody or somebody didn't say hi. It was just like a slight, somebody was offended clearly. And it was an attack to the ego, which really got the ball rolling to start like the First World War, something like that. Maybe I'm totally talking about something else, but that's kind of the same thing. It can all start with something so silly. Perhaps if you don't talk to a family member or a group of friends, or you had a falling out with a friend, it could have been over something so silly, but it continued to unravel and you were stubborn, or your ego wouldn't let you say you're sorry or forgive somebody. And now the results, that person isn't in your life, or they've passed away and you never had a chance to make amends off of something so silly. That's how powerful one decision can be in the unfolding of our lives and literally our destiny, where we end up, our destination in life. All right. Strange, is it not, how the great changes, such as the American Revolution and the World War, often have their beginnings in circumstances which seem unimportant? It is interesting also to observe that these important changes usually begin in the form of a definite decision in the minds of a relatively small number of people. Few of us know the history of our country well enough to realize that John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee of the province of Virginia were the real fathers of our country. Richard Henry Lee became an important factor in this story by reason of the fact that he and Samuel Adams communicated frequently by correspondence, sharing freely their fears and their hopes concerning the welfare of the people of their provinces. From this practice, Adams conceived The idea that a mutual exchange of letters between the 13 colonies might help to bring about the coordination of efforts so badly needed in connection with the solution of their problems. 2 years after the clash with the soldiers in Boston, March 72, Adams presented this idea to the Assembly in the form of a notion that a correspondence committee be established among the colonies, with definitely appointed correspondents in each colony, for the purpose of friendly cooperation for the betterment of the colonies of British America. Mark well this incident. It was the beginning of the organization of the far-flung power destined to give freedom to you and to me. The mastermind had already been organized. It consisted of Adams, Lee, and Hancock. I tell you further that if two of you agree upon the earth concerning anything for which you ask, it will come to you from my Father who is in heaven. That is a quote. The Committee of Correspondence was organized. Observe that this move provided the way for increasing the power of the mastermind by adding to it men from all colonies. Take notice that this procedure constituted the first organized planning of the disgruntled colonists. In union there is strength. The citizens of the colonies had been waging disorganized warfare against the British soldiers through incidences similar to the Boston riot, but nothing of benefit had been accomplished. Their individual grievances had not been consolidated under one mastermind. No group of individuals had put their hearts, minds, souls, and bodies together in one definite decision to settle their difficulty with the British once and for all until Adams, Hancock, and Lee got together. Meanwhile, the British were not idle. They too were doing some planning and masterminding of their own account, with the advantage of having back of them money and organized soldiery. Their crown appointed Gage to supplant Hutchinson as the governor of Massachusetts. One of the new governor's first acts was to send a messenger to call upon Samuel Adams to the purpose of endeavoring to stop his opposition by fear. We can best understand the spirit of what happened by quoting the conversation between Colonel Fenton, the messenger sent by Gage, and Adams. These all letters, I think these are all letters you could, that are kept in history. Colonel Fenton, I have been authorized by Governor Gage to assure you, Mr. Adams, that the governor has been empowered to confer upon you such benefits as would be satisfactory. That was his endeavor to win Adams by promise of bribes, upon the condition that you engage to cease in your opposition to the measure of the government. It is the governor's advice to you, sir, not to incur the further displeasure of his majesty. Your conduct has been such as makes you liable to penalties of an act of Henry VIII, by which persons can be sent to England for trial for treason or misprison of treason at the discretion of a governor of a province. But by changing your political course, you will not only receive great personal advantages, but you will make your peace with the king. Samuel Adams had the choice of two decisions. He could cease his opposition and receive personal bribes, or he could continue and run the risk of being hanged. Clearly, the time had come when Adams was forced to reach instantly a decision which could have cost his life. The majority of men would have found it difficult to reach such a decision. The majority would have sent back an evasive reply, but not Adams. He insisted upon Colonel Fenton's word of honor that the colonel would deliver to the governor the answer exactly as Adams would give it to him. Adams' answer: then you may tell Governor Gage that I trust I have long since made my peace with the King of Kings. No personal consideration shall induce me to abandon the righteous cause of my country. And tell Governor Gage it is the advice of Samuel Adams to him, no longer to insult the feelings of an exasperated people. Comment as to the character of this man seems unnecessary. It must be obvious to all who read this astounding message that his sender possessed loyalty of the highest order. This is important. Racketeers and dishonest politicians have prostituted the honor for which such men as Adams died. When Governor Gage received Adams' caustic reply, he flew into a rage and issued a proclamation which read, I do hereby, in his majesty's name, offer and promise his most gracious pardon to all persons who shall forthwith lay down their arms and return to the duties of peaceable subjects, accepting only from the benefit of such pardon Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose offenses are of too flatulous a nature to admit of any other consideration but that of condign punishment. As one might say in modern slang, Adams and Hancock were on the spot. That was modern slang 100 years ago. The threat of the irate governor forced the two men to reach another decision equally as dangerous. They hurriedly called a secret meeting of their staunchest followers. Here the mastermind began to take on momentum. Ooh, I'm going to stop right there for today. This is definitely a deep read. I'm reading the entire chapter, chapter 8 on decision. Will continue tomorrow. I remember reading this. I read this for 90 days, this whole chapter, and it really gave me a new perspective into the history of my country, the United States of America. And I remember the show Hamilton came out, and it made me understand it on a deeper level. You know, General Robert E. Lee, Jefferson, how the Declaration of Independence, the fight for freedom of our country when it was first starting, how it came to be, all of that stuff. So this was a really good, I loved reading this over and over and over. It just gave me a new perspective. But really, at the end of the day, of us as human beings, individually, in our power, the power we have individually by making decisions, how it can change literally the trajectory of this entire world as we know it. What decisions are you making? What decisions are you seeing being made around you? Are you always just up in arms and fighting what you don't like? Or are you using this power and shifting it to make positive changes? Decide today that you are going to use all of your powerful emotion and your thought, your mind power to make changes that better not only your life, but people around you. This is a really good chapter. I love this chapter on decision. We'll continue tomorrow, and have a wonderful day.